Can you all hear me just from here without having to speak into the mic? Yes? Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mike. It's been a while. I appreciate it. He made a comment. People up here on this side of the valley may not know what's going on at the port. I think people all over the valley, even in our own backyard, don't pay attention to what we're doing. So for us, it's an opportunity. I know we've been working very, very hard over the course of the years to really emphasize the fact the port is not a Brownsville thing. It's an RGV thing. It's a regional thing. What we do impacts us all. We're heavily involved in cross-border trade. We're the front end of a lot of stuff that comes back across the border as a finished product. So it isn't about Brownsville. And, I always tell people, you're in the area, welcome having people come and see what we do. Because there is a lot of things going on down there. They're not happening in other parts of the world, if you believe it or not. So let me go through it. I'll try to go by it quickly, and then I'll try to leave time for question and answer. So for those of you that have heard me multiple times, I'm sorry. You're going to hear some of the same stuff all over. But nonetheless, here we go. Very quickly, our cargo stats. This is based on 2021. We haven't completed our 2022, but we expect to see incremental growth. About 8 of the last 10 years, and we keep that thing rolling. I'm going to say 9 of the last 10 now with our 2021 stats. We have experienced incremental growth anywhere from 5 to 7% every year compounded. And it's reflected in some of the things we do. We're moving 13.8 million tons of cargo. And majority of that is all going into Mexico. I mean, we're no different than anybody else in the region. Historically, the economy has always been the connection to Mexico. And the port owes its history to, before it was a country, before it was a state, before everything, is trade with Mexico. And we continue that trend even today. A little bit. This is indicative of that. For the last 5 years, our rail car movements have increased 20%. Now, these are loaded rail car moves. And when you look at that number of 72,616 loaded rail car moves, about 85% of those are going into Mexico. Again, how critical that is for us. About 438,000 trucks come in and out of the port over a course of a year. We pioneered the overweight corridor program that's in the state. We pioneered it at the Port of Brownsville in the late 90s. And then vessel calls. We had a little over 1,700 vessel calls. And this is not only domestic, but also foreign. Not only ocean going, but barges and things that move product in and out of our port. This does not count shrimp boats or recreational boats or just so. It's actually what creates business. Why does the channel exist? Is to provide another form of transportation. I tell people, especially when I go to schools, how do we connect the Rio Grande Valley with the rest of the world? With Asia, with Germany, with Europe and the Pacific Rim, name it. It's by water. Yeah, we do it by plane, but that's an expensive way to move a lot of cargo. So we do it by water. Same thing goes for Middle America. We can go from the Port of Brownsville through Middle America all the way up to Michigan and Illinois. How do we do that? The Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, which runs from Brownsville all the way to the panhandle of Florida. If there's anything all Texas ports have in common, is we're all connected by the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway. But just as important, at New Orleans and at Mobile, we're connected to Pennsylvania, Illinois. Heck, we can go to Tulsa, Oklahoma by water, the inland waterway system. And that number's growing, and that's really what we're all about, is how do we increase cargo movement through the Port of Brownsville. A little bit about our foreign trade zone. This speaks to our role in cross-border business. We are the second-ranked foreign trade zone in the United States of nearly 200 FTZs, number 2 in the nation for the value of exported commodities. We import and then turn around and export. And where's that export? Into Mexico. Over $5 billion in value of just the exported commodities. On the import side, we import a lot of things from foreign countries. Europe, Asia, all over the world. That's another $4.5 billion. So again, we are a huge impact in the regional economy. And a lot of it is because what we do as it relates to trade across the border, back and forth. A little bit of the economic impact. We're actually going to work on our update for 2022. This is actually looking at 3 years ago. Our impact, the port's impact in the state of Texas. And we're a maritime port. A lot of people don't realize Texas is a maritime port. We usually lead the nation in cargo movement, whether it's destined to Texas or Texas is the origin of where that cargo leaves. Typically Texas, California. Houston is the largest trade cargo metrics port in the country. So in Texas, we have a very robust maritime industry. And our impact in terms of a job at the Port of Brownsville touches in some form or fashion about 51,000 employees in the state of Texas. It's about a $3 billion economy. 2.6 of that is in our region. This is the number that we care about. How do we impact the region? Right now, we're estimating about 9,000 employees. And about half of those are at the port, people that work at the port every day. Mike touched on Keppel landfills, the ship recyclers, but we've got a lot of liquid terminal operators. We've got mom and pops. It's a whole host. We are a landlord port. Again, we're the largest land-owning public port authority in the United States. We owned over 40,000 acres of land. Our model is we're a landlord. So we've got over 270 businesses there that lease land from us and then build their facilities and operate their facilities. We're not an operator, we're a landlord. So in that respect, we've got everything from the mom and pop to the Keppel landfills. A little bit about what we do. Shipbuilding is huge, and this is where I want to talk specifically about Keppel landfills, because nobody in the state of Texas is doing what we're doing at the Port of Brownsville as it relates to shipbuilding. And what I'm talking about is large ocean-going vessels, maritime vessels. I'm not talking about tugboats, I'm not talking about shrimp boats, and I'm not talking about barges. I'm talking about ships that travel the world. And in our case, this is Keppel landfills. Keppel has been in our community for over 30 years. It's been in our region for over 30 years. They've helped put a lot of kids through college. You saw the third generation of workers at Keppel are there now. And these are people from the Rio Grande Valley. And there's a lot of things that have happened at Keppel that haven't happened all over the world. And I only say that because I am one of those that believes that given the opportunity, we can demonstrate to anyone all over the world that we have the capability here to compete in a global marketplace. And we do. And Keppel is an example. They were basically in the offshore petroleum business, primarily rig manufacturers, rig repair, things of that nature. Well, we've seen that economy in the last 20 years go up and down. In fact, since 2000, Keppel has built more new offshore drilling and exploration rigs than everybody else in the nation, and the fourth largest builder in the world. Brownsville, Texas, here in the valley. Well, 2015, industry tanked again. And it really hasn't come back, although recently I've been reading more and more about rigs are starting to get back out into the Gulf. 75% of the rigs that were in the Gulf of Mexico in 2015 are no longer out there. So the industry always comes back leaner and meaner, but they come back. Well, we're starting to see a little movement. So they decided, we've got to do something. We actually saw the employment at Keppel go down to about 250 people. And we were worried. A lot of people, rumors all over town that they're leaving. They said, no, we're not. We're not leaving. Well, guess what? They made a decision. They decided to go into the shipbuilding business. And it's in their DNA because their parent company in Singapore is a global leader in the marine industry. So in 2017, they announced that they had gotten a contract to build two 774-foot container vessels that were going to be used in the Jones Act trade. Jones Act means only U.S. market. About 100 years ago, when we were a leader in global shipbuilding, there was an act called the Jones Act that was passed. And that was really done to protect the industry. Well, we're no longer a global leader. But the Jones Act still exists. And that means if you're going to operate in the Jones Act trade, meaning that you can go from one U.S. port to another U.S. port to another U.S. port, you have to be Jones Act. That means a vessel has to be built in the United States. It has to be built by a U.S.-owned company. It has to be flagged in the United States. It has to be crewed by a U.S. company. So they decided to focus on the Jones Act trade, which is really smart at the end of the day. It's a finite industry. You know, it's the fleet is aging, so they're competing in that space. Well, they announced that they had signed a contract to build two 774-foot container vessels for a family-owned business in Hawaii called Pasha Hawaii. And they operate from Honolulu to Long Beach to Oakland and back. Again, the U.S. trade. More importantly, those vessels were going to be designed not only to use conventional fuels, but they were also going to be able to operate on LNG. So, two things about that, which I love to tell. One, we brought back big shipbuilding to Texas. It hadn't occurred since World War II when they were doing it in Houston to support the war effort. But more importantly, we also imported the latest in the LNG propulsion technology for vessels. And those two vessels, the George and the Janet Marie, have been built. In fact, the George was delivered to Pasha Hawaii last year, and in August it made its maiden voyage from Honolulu to Long Beach to Oakland and back using LNG propulsion, using LNG as a fuel. The Janet Marie is in our port. She will be joining her husband, because George is the founder of the company and Janet Marie is the wife. I told somebody that story over the weekend. I said, well, you know, if you own a company, you better name a ship after your wife. And they just said, they got it wrong. You should have named the ship. The first one should have been the Janet Marie. The second one should have been the George. That's probably true. But each of them have the capability of carrying 5,550 TEUs, means container measurement. That means 2,550 40-foot boxes. And so, but it didn't stop there. So then they got another contract and they announced, we are building currently at the Port of Brownsville the largest trailing hopper dredge that will be in the U.S. fleet for a company called Manson. And that is under construction. They didn't stop there. They made another announcement that now we're building the first of its kind, and probably when it's complete, the most sophisticated vessel in the world, related to a vessel that will transport and erect the offshore wind turbines off the East Coast. You know, that's a big push right now. You know, January of 2021, you know, offshore wind, big deal. But we're building the first of its kind that's going to be used in the Jones Act trade at Keppel. So we saw them, Mike says, from 250 jobs to about 2,500 and growing. And there'll be more announcements like this coming. And if the industry comes back like it's starting to show signs of offshore oil, they're not out of the business. This was done to basically hold them over during the lean time. So we're not out of that yet. So we're really excited about what's going on with Keppel. Ship recycling. Mike mentioned it. We're the premier ship recycling port in the United States because we have a concentration of MARAD certified, very capable, large-scale ship recycling industry there. Used to be called ship breaking, then we called it ship dismantling. Now we call it ship recycling. And probably the biggest issue that people will remember is the aircraft carrier program. You know, the Navy had 7 conventional aircraft carriers that it's had basically obsolete and what we call in a ghost fleet. Just sitting there. What do we do with them? Well, about 2010, they decided we need to put them out for commercial recycling. And again, because it's Jones Act, it's in Texas, here in the United States. Shouldn't say just Texas, but in the United States. So we got the first one in 2013. We got the 6th one out of the 7 in May of last year, and we'll get the 7th one. I called yesterday to find out when is it coming, in the next quarter of next year. The Kitty Hawk, which is this one, I believe, is in the one that's in the port now. The last one of the conventional carriers of those 7 that will be coming to the port sometime next quarter is the JFK. And this is a big deal. I mean, that's 66,000 tons dead weight that will be recycled here. And these projects are classified until the last piece is done and gone. So having the Navy in our port's a big deal. But more importantly, we also have the only ship recycler in the United States that is certified by the European Union to handle its vessels. And we've already had a couple of those there. And that happens to be where 6 of the 7 aircraft carriers have gone to or will go to for recycling. And that's international shipbreaking or European metal markets. Again, talk about cross-border trade. A lot of what we do is in the bulk business. We're a break bulk port or a bulk commodities port. It means we move a lot of things in large, and some of it is dry and some of it is wet. On the wet side, we do a lot of petroleum-based commodities. We move a lot of gasoline, a lot of low sulfur grade diesel, a lot of jet fuel, a lot of lubricants, paraffin wax from Indonesia. And again, the majority of that's coming into a foreign country, and then we turn around and export it to Mexico. On the biggest commodity on the dry side is steel. We're the largest mover of steel into Mexico than any other port in the United States. But let me qualify. I'm not talking about finished product. We import a lot of the feedstock that then turns around and goes into the mills in Mexico for them to produce what might be their client in the automobile industry, in the white appliance industry, in the construction. That's what comes back across the river as a finished product. You know, so it starts at the port. And recently we've been doing a lot of wind blades. We've become one of the top 10 ports in the nation for the movement of wind blades. We've developed the capability of not only moving wind blades, but the largest wind blades that are being manufactured. The 81-meter blades. When we started this business, they were 125 feet. Now we're moving them 270-something feet long. And they've gotten bigger and bigger. So now we are moving blades by truck. We move blades by barge. We move blades by deep draft vessel. But what's really helped us is we're now moving blades by rail. 50% of the blades that we get into the port now move out by rail, which allows us to go all the way to Canada, Wyoming, Nebraska, New Mexico. And so they're coming in here, and we essentially are moving those blades out. And so that's a big, big plus for us. And it's not going away. In fact, there's a company in Matamoros, TPI Nordex, is actually the one that's manufacturing the big 81-meter blades. They selected Matamoros because of the port's ability to serve them for their point. We've got a project coming in from Vestas later this year, which we will be exporting blades to Chile. So we can reach Alberta, Canada. So this is going on here in the valley. Current projects. The biggest thing we've got going on, and people ask me, what do you think is the most important project? Well, it's really the channel deepening project. And in this country, these projects sometimes are generational because they don't happen very often. But we happen to be in the process of deepening our ship channel from 42 feet to 52 feet. In fact, tomorrow, our commission will award the first part of that, and that is the contract to begin to work on preparing the levees where we deposit the material that will come out of the deepening project, the dredge material placement areas. And that cost for the first phase of that project, just on our piece of it, is going to be about $15 million. But this is a project it's beginning this year, and it will actually deepen the entire stretch of the ship channel. From the Brownsville ship channel is a 17-mile man-made ship channel. There's the approach through the jetties and offshore. So you add another 2.3 miles, the entire transit to deep water is about, from the turning basin all the way out, is about 19.2, 19.3 miles. We're the closest port to deep water than anybody else on the Gulf Coast. It begins to go out further as you go up. Corpus further out, Houston's even, Galveston even further out. And so that's a big plus for us. Also, it's a very safe port. In fact, many times when there's activity in the Gulf, that hurricane or whatever, and Mexican fishing vessels get caught on the wrong side, we're designated safe harbor. So, that's important. This project is not being done, it's being done differently. In fact, project is being done different than any other project to date has been done in this country. And it's really because of the partnership that we've developed with Rio Grande LNG. Typically, a project like this is really mostly federal participation. In this country, all of the navigable waterways come under the control of the federal government, the U.S. Corps of Engineers. And if many of you are lucky to work with the Corps, well, God bless you all, because they don't do anything fast and they don't make anything easy. So this project is actually being done as a P3, a public-private partnership. This entire channel in this project is probably going to cost in excess of $400 million. And we have a partner, next decade, that has taken on about 60% of that total. That's huge for us. The balance of it we're doing it the conventional way, working in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Phase 1 is going to be done entirely by our private sector partner. Corps is not involved, other than oversight, but they're not going to do. They're going to execute on everything. On this part, what we call phase 2, we are actually working with the Corps. They are going to undertake the part of that phase. And right now, the project estimate on that is about $108 million, where we are on the hook for about $43 million. The balance of that is coming from the federal government. And what makes it different is the source is not the conventional source. Actually, we got a one-time allocation in March of last year through the IIJA Act. Remember the president, the second tranche of the big multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. We got $68 million, one-time shot, because this is a one and done. It's not one of those like in Corpus, you have to get funding every year to keep it going. This is one and done. So that money is what's going to the Corps for the federal share. So what typically would be in the current scheme of things, how a project like this works, 75% federal and 25% non-federal. We've kind of reversed that model. It's almost like 63%, or it's actually, the Corps is putting in about 25%, and we, as the non-federal sponsor with our private sector partner, are doing the other 75. This could be the model on how projects go forward in the future. So we're excited about that. This is the one everybody asks me about all the time. And I'm just going to tell you this. I was telling somebody at Maribel, because of course she's there and she's watching it. I'm almost giddy about when the big announcement is going to come that this thing is going forward. I mean, we've only been working on it for at least 10 years. Oh, by the way, we've been working on the channel deepening for 15, and that's quick, according to the federal government. So this project is a huge project for the region. You know, you've seen Eagle Ford, and we've heard about Eagle Ford, and you see what Eagle Ford did to Corpus Christi. I mean, it just transformed the Port of Corpus. And I tell people, you know, we've been on the fringes watching all of that. We weren't in the middle of that. We're just sitting here watching, and maybe we get some little trickle here and there. Well, guess what? We're bypassing Eagle Ford, and we're going straight into the global market for energy, because all of this is going to be for export. And this project here, you know, it's been in the works. I really believe we're going to see some huge news come out of that in the very, very near future, which actually means we're going forward with the project. A little bit, you know, this is a $11.4 billion investment. That's just the first part of the project. Now tell me, how often has the Valley even been in the discussion for a project of this nature? Never. We never have. In fact, the first multi-billion-dollar project happened and was completed in 2018 in the Valley, and nobody really said anything, done without fanfare, and that was the Valley Crossing Pipeline project that came from Agua Dulce through the port that's going and delivering gas to Mexico. That was a $1.8 billion project. That was the first major industrial project of that nature. Went on without a fanfare. Well, this one is going to be hard to keep it under wraps. I'll tell you that right now. And what does it mean? Well, you know, this is their deal about how it looks. This is what I kind of look at. What's the impact to the area here and here? This number basically means that those jobs that will be created, and a lot of them will be here, that's a 20-year plus man life for those jobs. And this is only phase one. You know, they have a permit to produce 27 million tons of LNG to export. That puts them on par with the largest LNG producer in the United States, which right now is Cheniere Sabine Pass. And so this is just the first phase of development. If they build out to that 27 million, this work deal has a 5 to 8 year life. And at peak, we expect to see, according to Bechtel, who is the EPC that's just ready to go on that project, that's 6,000 construction jobs. That's going to hit us all. It isn't going to be a Brownsville thing. It's going to be a Valley thing. It's going to be much greater than that. So we can't wait for this. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room can't wait for it either. Here's some other things. West Plains. You know, we're going to get back into the grain business in a big way. We have a $22 million project there, and the whole purpose of that is to get us back into loading vessels with grain for offshore market. And so we're excited about that. We have another company coming in, Forza Steel. This is a Mexican company who wants to come in and kind of wet their toe in the U.S. market. And they're basically going to be primarily providing fabricated material pipes, bent steel, whatever, for the automotive industry, the energy business, construction business. Hey, $32 million investment, 50 plus jobs, we'll take them. We've got Sunoco. Sunoco, you've seen them come back into the market. You've seen their sign go up at the Stripes and at the Circle K's and what have you. Well, guess what? They've decided we're going to be our own supplier of fuel for our own enterprise. And so they built a terminal. It started this June. They got into production. $55 million investment, 15 to 20 jobs. And what I tell people is the maritime industry is not a minimum wage employer. So these are good paying jobs. And more importantly, the 560,000 barrels of storage capability put us at about 8 million barrels of storage capability at the Port of Brownsville. So much of what you see that we use here comes through the port, but the majority of that is going into Mexico. Premium gasoline, we can get it from Sweden. We can get it, it's not domestic. A lot of it is brought in by deep draft vessel. We'll have a vessel in port with 350,000 barrels of premium gasoline coming offloaded here, and it's all going into Mexico. Same thing goes with low sulfur grade diesel. A lot of it is going into Mexico. Jet fuel, the lubricants, the paraffin wax. We get paraffin wax from Indonesia. Same thing with latex. Guess what? It's all going into Mexico. And then Pesqueria project. This is a big, big deal for us. This is our big steel partner in Mexico. Pesqueria is a state-of-the-art steel mill that was built in Monterrey. They're the supplier to Kia, for example. And it's an incredible facility, multi-billion-dollar investment. Well, about 90% of the slab that they need to produce that commodity for the customer comes through the port. I think this year or last year was going to be like 4.6, 4.8 million tons. In fact, I just looked today, between now and the 15th, in the next 2 weeks, we will have imported about 450,000 tons of slab steel at the port and put it on the ground. All of that stuff moves by rail. Hence, 72,000 loaded rail cars are moving to Mexico. Pancho's here. I mean, he'll tell you what one of these things does in terms of who it touches. Trucking, rail, stevedoring, logistics, customs. I mean, it takes a lot of people to unload and move all of this commodity. And that's really where the jobs are when you talk about the maritime trade. We love the liquid business, but it isn't a big job producer. 3 guys sitting there watching the pipes, make sure they don't come a cup while they're unloading or loading the vessel. But on the job site with the stevedores, it can take up to 5 gangs of 20 people for gang 5 days to unload a 55,000 ton ship. That's really where the jobs come in. plus all of the other things, Keppel, the ship recyclers. But we're huge. I mean, we're a logistics platform. That is what we are, whether it's by water, by rail, by road, or by pipeline. We can move those commodities. We have pipeline connectivity to Mexico, whether it's to Cadereyta, or whether it's to Burgos, or other areas. We do import from Salamanca, from Cadereyta, sometimes Burgos, which is a number 6 fuel oil. It's a process of the refining process in Mexico. We import it to the Port of Brownsville by train. It's offloaded, and it's loaded on the barges, and it goes to Deer Park, because Mexico owns a refinery there. And what they do, since they have limited refining capacity, they take that and create other refined products for it that then comes back across the border. So I'll stop here and just kind of open it up for questions. But, there is a lot going on. And again, it isn't because it's going on in Brownsville, it's because it's going on here in the valley. So like I said, I'll stop there, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And if